in time of war. And what a privilege it is to be here with Vice President Pence, Mr. Bossert, General Walters, our great French ambassador to the United States, Ambassador Raoult, and our Lebanese Charge of Affairs, Carla Jazar. Great to see both of you here today. And then especially Lieutenant Colonel Larry Gerlach and all of the veterans and their families from the Beirut Veterans of America and Beirut. 34 years ago, early in the morning, on October 23rd, 1983, Hezbollah destroyed our Marine barracks in Beirut, Lebanon. 241 American Marines, sailors, and soldiers were killed, and 128 others wounded. This mass murder occurred just 6 months after the bombing of the U.S. Embassy in Beirut, which killed 63 Americans and Lebanese. The Marines and other service members who were killed that day were part of a multinational peacekeeping force that had arrived a little over a year before to help stop Lebanon's civil war. By 1983, that terrible war had already lasted 8 years and had destroyed the country while drawing Lebanon's neighbors into the conflict. Our Marines were in Lebanon to help save the Lebanese people from the suffering that followed during the next 7 years of war. But the Iranian regime, as it has done elsewhere, used terror attacks to prevent peace and perpetuate suffering. We should remember that the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps officer who orchestrated the October 23rd attacks was, until 2 months ago, Iran's defense minister. The murderers who carried out the attack became top commanders of Hezbollah, and as if to symbolize the need for all of us to confront Iran and its proxy Hezbollah together, just minutes after those criminals attacked the Marine barracks, they also struck the nearby barracks of the French peacekeeping contingent, killing 58 French paratroopers. It is a great honor to be here to pay tribute to those who gave their last full measure of devotion for peace. We will never forget their service and sacrifice for our nation and all humanity. It is fitting that the epitaph, "They came in peace," is indelibly etched into the memorial at the U.S. Embassy in Beirut. And we must honor the memory of our Marines and other servicemen and women and French paratroopers. We must honor them with our deeds. The mass murder attacks conducted at the behest of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps was the most deadly surprise attack on Americans since the attack on Pearl Harbor. It remained so until the mass murder attack on 9/11. Those who fell in Beirut and on 9/11 must ever remind us of our grave responsibility to defeat the terrorist networks that continue to destabilize the Middle East, brutalize people, and attack civilization. Whether at the behest of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps or the Takfirist groups such as Al-Qaeda and ISIS, these groups are all the enemies of humanity, of all peace-loving nations. We should all, though, today be inspired by those you see on this field today, who have volunteered to protect our nation, to hunt down these terrorists who will not intimidate America or our allies or our partners. Semper Fidelis, and God bless America.
Ladies and gentlemen, the former commanding officer of 1st Battalion 8th Marines of Marine Barracks, Beirut, Lieutenant Colonel Larry Gerlach, United States Marine Corps, retired.
Vice President Pence, General Walters. So much for my remarks, right? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for hosting and joining with the Beirut Veterans of America and the Beirut Gold Star families for remembrance of the 241 Marines, sailors, and soldiers that were killed 34 years ago today. They were acting as part of a multinational peacekeeping force comprised of the United States and our close allies, the French, the British, and the Italians. Today, we also remember the French allies who simultaneously lost 58 paratroopers in another explosion in a coordinated attack on 23 October 1983. Today, I'm honored to make a few remarks about these men, any one of whom I would be proud to have as my brother or son. They were everything that a brother in arms could be. Tough, brave, loyal, and for the most part, always ready to laugh, even under some very difficult circumstances. They loved their families dearly, and they missed them. And there's not a day that goes by, I don't think, of the Marines, sailors, and soldiers of 1-8 and their families. And I am grateful every day for you Beirut veterans and their families. Over the years when we have seen each other at similar events, every time I have tried to give comfort to one of the families for the loss of a loved one, I have received comfort back tenfold. Thank you. I thought about commenting about the peacekeeping mission. However, all I'll say, it was a noble mission. It started in a permissive environment. The situation became hostile, but the mission didn't change. It was supposed to be accomplished by presence, whatever that is. Instead of mission creep, we had situation creep. But the highly trained warriors of 1-8 were prepared and handled the change very well. We are here today because our eyes have been affected in some way by the vicious bombing of the headquarters of BLT 1-8 headquarters in Beirut, Lebanon in 1983. And we're here to commemorate the men who gave their lives in service to their country and to the cause of peace. They came in peace is the motto written on the Beirut Memorial in Jacksonville, North Carolina. They were known as peacekeepers, but unfortunately, by the end of their stay, there was no peace to keep. The many factions in Beirut were saying to it that the peace would be shattered, especially the Hezbollah. The gas-enhanced explosion that hit BLT 1-8 headquarters was delivered by a multi-ton truck and estimated to be equivalent to over 20,000 pounds of TNT, the largest non-nuclear explosion ever as described by the FBI. The bomb and bombing was proven in a court of law to have been made, funded, ordered, and executed by Iran. This was not the first time Iran violated international law by attacking the United States. Just 4 years earlier, Iran invaded our embassy in Tehran and held 52 hostages for 444 days. They continue to be the biggest state sponsor of terrorism today, and it appears they are not holding up to the spirit of the nuclear agreement. They continue to fill the role as bad actors on the world stage. As we all know, the government of Iran was responsible for this attack on our Marine sailors and soldiers and our country. Iran has not changed its tune in the last 34 years and has continued to inflict terrorist attacks on the West. It appears they will continue to march ahead, spewing their hatred for the West, especially the United States and Israel. And they will continue to try to achieve their goal of nuclear capability. This must not, I pray this will not happen. I thank you for the opportunity to be here and celebrate and commemorate the lives of those that we lost in Beirut. I better stop before I start getting choked up. But God bless you all, and God bless the United States of America, and God bless all our erstwhile allies. And I love Lebanon, in case there's any doubt. God bless you and thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Glenn M. Walters.
Colonel Gerlach, you give me a high bar. Thank you, sir. Distinguished guests, fellow service members, family and friends, for we Marines, it is a genuine honor for you to share this day of remembrance with us here at 8th and I. We thank you for being here. The Marines have had a long history of fighting terrorism. The attack on those that wear the cloth of our nation 34 years ago today is a significant event in our history of our Corps and our nation. It is the greatest single day of loss for the Marine Corps since the Battle of Iwo Jima. We have learned and adapted from that tragedy of October 23rd, 1983. Hezbollah and other terrorist groups like it will not prevail against America, our values, or our way of life. Our Coast Guardsmen and women, our soldiers, our sailors, our airmen, and our Marines, those of today's generation, continue that fight today. The very best of our nation, the men and women you see here in uniform today, courageously volunteer their service to keep our enemies from our front doors, to ensure the safety and security of their fellow Americans. We celebrate the brave veterans of Beirut with us here today. We honor the 241 souls that did not come home from that mission. 220 Marines, 18 sailors, and 3 soldiers. We thank our partners, Italy, France, and Great Britain, for their courage to stand with us and for their own sacrifice. They all serve to protect and provide peace for the citizens of Lebanon. For the Marines that served side by side with those that we lost, to the friends and the families of the heroes that gave our nation the last full measure of sacrifice that day, our thoughts and prayers remain with you. Rest assured that their service, their sacrifice, and your loss remain a fundamental part of the fabric of our legacy and of our nation. Their courageous and quiet service spoke for freedom. Let us never forget this truth. And now, it is my distinct honor and privilege to introduce the father of a Marine who serves today as our 48th Vice President of the United States, Mr. Mike Pence.
Rabbi Reznikov, Secretary Shulkin, Acting Secretary Duke, General McMaster, General Walters, Colonel Zagurski, Lieutenant Colonel Gerlach, Ambassador Arad, Shar Jazar, and to all the members of the United States Marine Corps, all of our armed forces, our honored veterans, and the family members of our beloved fallen. It is deeply humbling for me to join you today to commemorate the 34th anniversary of the Beirut Marine barracks bombing. There is no more fitting place in our nation's capital to mark this solemn day than here, at the oldest post of the United States Marine Corps, the Marine Barracks of Washington, D.C. And Colonel, we are grateful for your leadership and for the hospitality of all these Marines. This facility is an enduring testament to the fortitude and valor of America's Marines. It has stood here for more than 2 centuries, and, as tradition holds, in the War of 1812, the British refrained from burning it out of respect for the leathernecks they faced in battle. For my part, it's deeply humbling for this father of a United States Marine to stand before so many of the few and the proud, and to thank you for your service to the United States of America and to freedom. Today, it's my privilege to speak to you on behalf of your Commander-in-Chief, President Donald Trump. And I bring the President's greetings. But more than that, I bring the President's heartfelt condolences and those of my little family and all of the American people. To all of you who are gathered here today, who lost a family member or a friend on that day in October in 1983. 34 years ago today, America was thrust into war with an enemy unlike any we had ever faced. The sun rose early on that Sunday morning, climbing above the mountains of Lebanon, casting the day's first beams of light across the city of Beirut. The soft rays of sunshine soon reached the airport to the barracks, where the members of the 1st Battalion, 8th Marines, and many others had already begun to stir. These brave Americans were stationed in that ancient land to keep a fragile peace. As we just heard, they were there and they came in peace. They were shoulder to shoulder with their brothers in arms from the United Kingdom, Italy, and France. For more than a year, this force of freedom stood together to protect the innocent and prevent a civil war from becoming an even greater tragedy. But for that very reason, because of the principles for which they stood and the peace for which they strived, these heroes aroused the attention of great evil. And on that Sunday morning, that evil set them in its sights. The men began their day like any other, writing letters to their loved ones, eating in the mess, rising from their racks. But beyond the barracks walls, unbeknownst to them, a lone truck began its approach. It entered the airport, turned toward the building, circled in a parking lot just beyond the wire barrier. And then history records the truck rushed forward, burst through the wires, sped between 2 guard posts and through the open gate, crashed into the lobby. Within seconds, within just moments, the driver detonated his deadly cargo. The light of the dawning sun was virtually eclipsed by what was described as the largest non-nuclear explosion in the history of the world. In that moment, 241 Americans lost their lives. They were soldiers, they were sailors, but the vast majority of them were United States Marines. It was the bloodiest day for the United States Marine Corps since the assault on Iwo Jima. The men we lost were fathers. They were brothers. They were sons. And they died in defense of peace and freedom. And for that, we will forever remember their service and their sacrifice. Of that, I can assure these precious families who are here today. We also remember the 58 French paratroopers who died only moments later when a second attacker struck their installation. Just moments after the ambassador just told me they had heard the explosion in the distance. And then terrorist violence would be visited upon them. The Bible tells us that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. And to the families of the fallen, even now 34 years hence, let me assure you that will be our prayer for you this day. In fact, let me take this moment to recognize all the members of the Beirut families here today. You honor us with your presence. Let me also acknowledge Rabbi Reznikov, Colonel Gerlach, and all the members of the Beirut Veterans of America who were there on that day, who lost so many friends and fellow Marines and have never failed to honor the lost, not just one day a year, but every day in your careers and in your lives. Of your organization, your motto rings ever true, that our first duty is to remember. And so you have. And today, President Trump and the First Lady, my family, and all of the American people do our duty as well. We remember our fallen heroes and those they left behind. But we also have a duty to honor the memory of our fallen by continuing to stand strong to fight and defeat the enemy that so cruelly took them from us. The Beirut's barracks bombing was the opening salvo in a war that we have waged ever since, the global war on terror. It's a conflict that has taken American troops across the wider world, from Lebanon to Libya, from Nigeria to Afghanistan, from Somalia to Iraq, and many other battlefields in between. At this very hour around the globe, thousands of brave Americans are defending our freedom from the forces of terror. And to them, and to all of you, I say with confidence, under this Commander-in-Chief, the armed forces of the United States will have the support they need to confront our enemy and win. President Trump has already taken decisive action to make the strongest military in the history of the world stronger still. Our president has already signed the largest increase in defense spending in nearly 10 years. And as we speak, we're working with the Congress to pass the largest investment in national defense since the days of Ronald Reagan. And under President Trump, I promise you, we will rebuild our military, we will restore the arsenal of democracy, and we will once again give our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guard the resources and training they need to accomplish their mission and come home safe. And with renewed American strength, this President has made clear that America will stand with our allies and we will stand up to our enemies. And we are taking the fight to terrorists on our terms, on their soil. Radical Islamic terrorism is a hydra with many heads, striking London, Paris, Barcelona. No matter what name they choose to go by or where they try to hide, this President and our armed forces are committed, as the President said in his own words, to destroy terrorist organizations and the radical ideology that drives them. And so we will. The brutal act that brings us here today was planned and perpetrated by the terrorists of Hezbollah. Under President Trump's leadership, we've redoubled our commitment to cripple Hezbollah's terrorist network and bring its leaders to justice. Earlier this year, under President Trump's leadership, our law enforcement arrested 2 Hezbollah operatives in New York and Michigan. And earlier this month, our administration announced rewards for information leading the location, arrest, and conviction of 2 of Hezbollah's senior-most leaders, including Faoud Shakur, one of the masterminds behind the bombing of the Marine Corps barracks. But as we all know, that terrorist group is merely a proxy for the leading state sponsor of terrorism. And President Donald Trump has put Iran on notice that we will no longer tolerate their destabilizing activities or their support of terrorism across the region and across the world. Iran's theocratic rulers aided and abetted the Beirut bombers 34 years ago and even now. Iran praises the attackers and remembers them as martyrs. Worse yet, the Iranian regime continues to funnel funds and weapons to its terrorist minions with the goal of shedding blood and sowing chaos throughout the wider world. Just over a week ago, our President took decisive action to confront Iran's aggression when he announced that the United States of America will no longer certify the Iran nuclear deal or tolerate Iran's support of global terrorism. This President will not sit idly by while the Ayatollahs in Tehran plot more attacks, like the horrific attack that we remember today. As the President often says, he has no higher priority than the safety and security of the American people. And we will fight tirelessly to defeat the specter of radical Islamic terror no matter where it rears its ugly head. In Afghanistan, our President has made it clear that our armed forces will remain engaged in the fight against the Taliban and all the terrorist groups in the region until we eliminate that threat to our homeland and our people once and for all will be safe and free. And so, too, we will continue the fight against the terrorists of ISIS. 3 years ago, those barbarians celebrated in the streets of their self-declared capital in Raqqa. They perpetrated unspeakable acts of violence and drove countless people from their homes in Iraq and Syria. And they proclaimed the start of a 1,000-year caliphate as they raised their black flags across the region. But today, those flags no longer fly in their self-proclaimed capital of Raqqa. As a candidate, our President pledged, in his words, to crush and destroy ISIS. And today, thanks to the courage of our armed forces, resolve of our Commander-in-Chief, ISIS is on the run. Just last week, American and Allied forces liberated Raqqa. And across Syria and Iraq, the caliphate is crumbling. And you can be assured We will not rest, we will not relent until we hunt down and destroy ISIS at its source so it can no longer threaten our people, our allies, or our way of life. The war on terror began 34 years ago today. At this very hour, on frontiers of freedom, brave Americans continue the fight, continue to sacrifice. As even today we grieve the loss of 4 American heroes who fell in Niger earlier this month. As we do today, we honor their service and sacrifice, and we grieve with their families and friends. Even more so, we renew our pledge that their and the sacrifice we remember today will not have been in vain. And as a nation, we resolve that under the leadership of President Donald Trump, we will drive the cancer of terrorism from the face of the earth. As I close, let me say again how deeply humbling it is for me to be with all of these families and these courageous Marines today. It is an honor as your Vice President, but it is also my honor because, as our family knows, I could well be sitting in a different seat today with the Beirut families, remembering a loved one and a hero lost 34 years ago. The general was kind to note that I'm the proud father of a United States Marine. But I'm also the proud brother of a United States Marine. My older brother enlisted in the Marines back when I was in college. He was assigned to the 3rd Battalion, 3rd Marines. And in 1983, that battalion was ordered to Beirut, including First Lieutenant Greg Pence. Like a lot of Marines, my brother liked to send a lot of letters home, and we waited anxiously for him. Turned out he lived in the very barracks where the attack occurred with all his fellow Marines. I remember one letter he told us that early in the morning and sometimes late at night he'd like to go up on the roof to watch the sunrise or watch the sunset. He'd sit next to an American flag that fluttered in that autumn breeze. He sent me a picture of it that he saved just the other day. When we first heard about the Beirut bombing, all we could think about as a family was that our brother was there. I called my parents immediately to ask if Gregory was okay. They didn't know. I called his new bride, Denise, asked if she'd heard anything. She hadn't. As families gathered here, remembering those times, we waited. It was a different time. We didn't have emails and text messages and 24-hour news. All our family could do is what your families did. Wait. Hope. And pray. And we did. A couple days passed before he called. Turned out he'd shipped out with his battalion only days before the bombing. Gregory was able to come home to that new wife, put his arms around our folks, start his own family. But I promise all of you, just like my brother, we'll never forget. We'll never forget the 241 who never had that chance. When heroes fall, America mourns. And today, 34 years on, we still mourn with those who mourn and grieve with those who grieve. But we do not grieve like the rest who have no hope. Because our faith gives us hope. And heroes give us hope. To the families of our fallen, I say with conviction, the memory of your loved ones will live on forever, enshrined in the hearts and the memory of a grateful nation. And as long as America endures, we will honor their service and sacrifice, and we will strive every day to be worthy of it. We will do our part in our time to keep lit the flame of freedom for which they gave that last full measure. And we will ever kindle the flame of faith. For as Rabbi Reznikov wrote so many years ago, it is through faith that we find strength. And today and every day, we take comfort in the knowledge that they were, as God above is and ever will be, Semper Fidelis. May God bless our beloved fallen. May God bless and comfort their families gathered here and across this nation. May God bless our veterans. May God bless all you who serve. And may God continue to bless the United States of America.